Aloha, I'm Lyla Berg, and we're here at Waikalua Loko Iʻa, the fish pond in Kaneohe, ready to meet the people who inform, inspire, and impact our daily lives. Thank you for joining us on Island Focus.
So this is Kaneohe Stream that flows all the way up from the mountain, all the way out into Kaneohe Bay right here, and right next to our Waikalua Loko fish pond. In the days of old, this water that flows from the mountain to the sea was very important because it brought fresh water into the Loko Iʻa. It doesn't anymore, but hopefully someday it will. But we, as an introduction for students here, we talk about the continuity and the connection, Maukamakai, within the ahupua of Kaneohe, right here. And this is a great spot because you can actually see how the water flows and how the pond is connected to the bay and to Mauka.
So this is fresh water that comes into the bay.
Yes.
And feeds the fishes.
Yes.
And the intention is to have not only the children understand, but also at some point to have the fish come back.
Yes. And probably more importantly today is that I always use the metaphor of the water. The flow of the water is like the blood in your veins, the koko. If you put junk into your body, that's not good for you. If you put junk into the water, that's not good for the environment as well. Do you hear anything?
Well, I hear the water, the waves.
Which direction is the wind blowing?
This way.
Where is the sun right now?
Straight ahead. Well, to the right.
Right.
By the mountains.
So this is an exercise about making connections to a place, really be in the moment, and to understand where you're standing and what you are bringing to the place. So, Hawaiians call it kilo, right? You need to be observant. How high is the water? Where is the sun? What direction is the wind blowing? What do you see or hear, far away?
And you know what it felt like is that the water is going like this. It's a big hug.
That's why we come out here.
It's a very embrace.
You feel like you are in the ocean, but you're still in this Maukamakai connection.
I felt very loved here.
Yeah.
Mahalo for tuning in to Island Focus and joining me in meeting Herb Lee, who's President and CEO of the Pacific American Foundation. Mahalo. This place is more than special to you.
Yes, it is. It's been transformative for me, and it has totally changed my life. And this is a commitment and a calling that, and a kuleana that is lifelong and multi-generational.
So maybe share a little bit more about this particular fish pond and how you got started in stewarding.
Sure. Well, I grew up right up the street, and I didn't know that this pond existed until I was almost 40 years old, and that was 25 years ago. And I had an opportunity to do something where it was kind of controversial at the time. We started a nonprofit, and we began to restore Waikalua Loko in 1995, and it's been a absolutely wonderful experience, hard and challenging, but super rewarding. The restoration is really not about only the physical restoration, it's about transformation of self and family and community and helping to inspire students and education in ways that I never thought was possible.
Maybe you can speak a little bit more about what that transformation is, because when we hear about a fish pond, for most people, especially ones living in the city area, it's water with rocks around it.
So if you think about the embodiment of indigenous wisdom, walking in the footsteps of our ancestors and the accumulated knowledge of the indigenous people, the Native Hawaiians of this place, which is unique and special, I think it embodies that indigenous power and mana and knowledge that we've slowly been able to sort of retrieve and kind of relearn and re-experience, and combine that with advances in modern society, with technology and science and contemporary ways of doing things, and combining both the knowledge and skill and the practice of that every day to be able to now problem solve. And we need both of it. We need the indigenous wisdom and we need contemporary knowledge to be able to solve the problems of the world today so that we can be better than what we have, up to this point.
How might you help some of us who are not Koko Hawaiian and respect the indigenous culture, but at the same time are kind of trapped in this place where I belong, but I don't belong. I grew up here, but I'm not from here.
Well, I've always believed that, people are here by choice, right? Whether they're born here or whether they actually made a choice to locate here. And we cannot, as Native Hawaiians, we have a kuleana, but we cannot do it ourselves. We have to rely on all of the resources, including people from different cultures that have chosen to make Hawaii home. We all have a reciprocal kuleana to take care of this very special place. And that's why the power of aloha is so important, because it crosses all of those boundaries. And we just, as a kapuna have taught me, we just have to learn how to tap in to that power of aloha.
You've trusted the process.
Yes.
The Western process as well as the indigenous process. What did you personally learn from all of this?
Well, I thought in the beginning, 1995, that it was about aloha aina, that we have lost the connection to understanding how the aina and the land connects to us and feeds us. But what I learned over the years is that that really is the fourth step, that the first step is understanding the power, as I said, aloha from Akua, and that he gives us that power, and then we have a kuleana to share that aloha. So we call that aloha kekahi I kekai. That's the second step. And the third step is we always make a circle over here, and we always remind ourselves that, we have that power within us, and then we can understand aloha aina.
So as a last message to the audience as we wrap up our conversation today, what might that be?
Well, society is changing so quickly, and we're moving to a place where we don't have that kind of connection and contact anymore. In Hawaii, and with indigenous wisdom and knowledge and the practice of culture, it is all about relationships between people, families, and place. And that is the most important thing with the power of aloha, to be able to continue to enjoy the kind of life that we want in Hawaii that makes it so unique. We need to use that power to hopefully be more independent than we are, just like our ancestors were, in terms of food sustainability, food sovereignty, and just to malama each other and malama the land.
And what you've also taught me over the years is the relationship with ourselves. We come out here and we're so at peace.
Yeah.
Thank you for creating that for us.
Thank you. Mahalo for being here.
Thank you. You just had the wonderful opportunity to meet Herb Lee, who is President and CEO of the Pacific American Foundation. Aloha. I'm here with Jason Misaki, who is the wildlife biologist with DLNR in Hawaii. Thank you for joining us. You have quite a responsibility as a wildlife biologist. Maybe you could share a little bit about how does this place also fit into your work?
The program that I manage is tasked to manage the wildlife resources, especially the native resources within the state. And we do that by designating wildlife sanctuaries, providing habitats, protecting the species so that they're able to thrive. Places like this falls into the bigger picture of creating and maintaining populations throughout the island so that we can slowly expand the recovery of these species.
Well, and we were talking a little bit earlier about you growing up on Molokai. Did that prepare you for this job that you have?
It did prepare me, and I didn't realize that until I got into this job. Growing up, being outdoors all the time, my dad was in conservation, so he had a lot of influence on it, going hunting, going fishing. It really did prepare me, and I didn't realize it until I got into this field and I got into this job, and I said, this is all the stuff that I do for fun, and now I get paid to do it. I get to run around, in these areas, looking at animals and plants and trying to make sure that I understand them. And so, yeah, I feel very prepared for this.
And being outside, right? What a wonderful job that is, to be in the fresh air.
Oh, yeah, that's one of the biggest perks about the job.
Does your designation, or is the area designated to DLNR and your responsibility also include the Northern Hawaiian Islands?
We have Kure Atoll, which is the northwesternmost atoll within the Papahanaumokuakea National Marine Monument. And that is also an example of how the space between the places that we're managing is important because everything is so spread out. We want to ensure that we have consistent management practices to ensure that the species are able to move in between the areas that we are managing and areas that are outside of it that are also being managed.
And how does climate change and the reality of weather patterns being different now and currents and temperatures, how does that impact your job?
We have to be aware of it. We manage coastal areas and coastal lands. We manage wetlands, which potentially could serve a big part in the potential climate change. What we try to make sure is we have a solid foundation for how we manage the land and how we manage the species. And hopefully the decisions that we're making, the way that we're managing the lands, are able to withstand whatever changes happen in the future with climate change or with anything.
And so how are you addressing when people get a little bit animated, shall we say, about climate change or about the changes here in Hawaii? Everything changes, that's part of life. How, from your perspective, how do you handle that?
When I hear them talk about climate change, it's a long, drawn-out process. And when I look at the goals that we have for now and even in the near future for when I'll be around, I don't think it'll change a whole lot in terms of what we're doing. Want to be aware of it.
What the department is planning and implementing.
I definitely think they're aware of what's happening and there's programs being involved in it. A lot of it is to adjust some of the fundamental things that we're doing as far as wetland management, as far as fortifying coastlines and areas around there to make sure that we're not creating habitats that could potentially be gone in the future. So a lot of that future planning, being more strategic in realizing that things are going to change is sort of where the department is on that.
What is one challenge that you most recently got through? Let's put it that way.
Since I've been managing the lands, especially within Kauai Marsh, is the level of public interest that we're hearing. Maybe that hasn't changed, but we're able to get a lot more feedback from the public with social media, with different outlets that are out there. So we get to hear what people think is good, what people think is bad, and what people want to see changed. And part of our job and our duties is to take that into account in the decisions that we're making because we're managing this land and we're managing this resource for the benefit of the public. So that is a huge undertaking. We get a lot of positive feedback on the work that we're doing for endangered species within wetlands.
And it must be rewarding when you're able to have that conversation with the public.
Yeah, and we try to ensure that when we provide feedback and answer questions, it's based on information that we're gathering on the site. We're making a decision based on what the biological resources and the monitoring is telling us. And ultimately, that's the foundation that we need to build in order to say that we want to move forward in this process, and this is why, and that's the driver for the decisions that we make.
Well, thank you for spending a few minutes with us. Appreciate meeting you.
Thank you.
You've just had the opportunity to listen to my conversation with Jason Misaki, who is the wildlife biologist with the DLNR here in Hawaii. Mahalo. I'm here at Waikalua Loko Iʻa with Lieutenant Colonel Polka, who is the Environmental Director at Kaneohe Base, Hawaii. Glad you could be with us.
Thank you.
Environmental Director for the Marine Base.
Mm-hmm.
What does that entail?
What that means is that I'm the advisor to the base commanding officer on all of his environmental issues. I have a team of staff that are media area experts in water quality, air quality, natural resource conservation, cultural resource management, and we'll put together our advice, our information, and recommendations to the base commanding officer for projects, for public relations, for stewardship, and that kind of thing. So for me as the environmental director, We work on a wide range of programs, from pollution prevention, so that's recycling and solid waste management, hazardous waste, conservation, which would be environmental planning, which would be natural resources, conservation law enforcement, kind of like a ranger, but they're on the Marine Corps properties, making sure that we're complying with our natural resource conservation, cultural resource conservation laws. And also do compliance, and compliance is where we check with all of our tenant, inspect all of our tenant organizations on base, all of our installation offices on base, that they're complying with federal, state, local, DOD environmental regulations.
I had no idea that a military base would be so committed to where we are. Was this your background?
So I've always had an interest in water quality, water resource management, and then natural resources. I've always loved the outside, outdoors. Got into the Marine Corps 25 years ago at this point, and pursued flying helicopters. Most of my career, got to
Helicopters.
fly
So you were looking at the environment from
the air,
above.
looking down, right? But then I found out that there's an environmental officer job in the Marine Corps. Not very many of us, but there's a couple, and so I got some graduate education and became an environmental officer about the last 7 years or so.
There must be challenges, because the whole, I guess, the persona of the military has been in the past to be maybe on the land, not with the land.
The Marine Corps is empowered or required to, or entrusted as stewards of the resources that we have. So my position is the bridge between that stewardship and supporting the mission. So it's a very interesting and frankly, it's a rewarding challenge for me to try to do that stewardship, promote it, take care of all the resources that we have while we're supporting the mission at the same time. So that ends up being the challenge, but the reward of my job.
It's quite a progressive mission. I'm very touched to hear this, having grown up in Hawaii myself. And it must be exciting for your children to be here.
Oh, they love it. They love it. I will say one funny story. I came from the desert, the Mojave Desert, and one of my young children, she was 4 at the time, and she goes, "Daddy, this place looks just like the desert, except there's less palm trees." And we look around at the water and go, how can you say that? But the kids love it. My wife loves it out here. And the work is really the best part of it. The people we're working with, the resources that we're working with, the land that we're living with is incredible.
How might we support the mission that you are promoting?
So the mission for us is to support the warfighter, support the Marines, support readiness, force projection. That's the mission of the base. So I guess awareness that is our priority. Additionally, we also look at volunteerism. We're trying to get as many partners as we can from inside the base population, but also in the community. We do things like Weed Warriors, where every 2 months we are pulling out invasive species in our fish ponds or our wildlife management areas. We do beach cleanups, recycling efforts. And so getting community involvement in that is a priority, and we're trying to expand that as we go.
Well, thank you so much for your dedication to our islands.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
And also for appreciating, who we are.
I love to do it.
Thank you so much. You've just had the opportunity to meet Lieutenant Colonel Polka, who is the Environmental Director with the Kaneohe Marine Base, Hawaii. Aloha. We're standing at the edge of the fish pond.
Yes.
And this walkway is significant for you too.
So this is called a kuapa. The entire fish pond is known as a loko kuapa. It is a wall structure that separates the pond from the bay, Kaneohe Bay. It's been here in various forms for the last 400 years. So we have been engaged in a very proactive wall reconstruction of the wall over the last 2 years.
Well, I can see here there are many different forms of rocks that you've been using.
Yes.
And cement blocks.
Yes.
Must be a challenge to find the right kind of rocks.
Yes, and we've been able to find a supply of rocks from the west side, from the Waianae coast, that we think best fits the dry stack method, and that can ensure that hopefully when we're done with it, it'll be good for another 100 years.
So does every fish pond have such a walkway around it?
For the local kuapa, yes. And then there's other ponds that have sand banks and things like that. Some other fish ponds come off stream, so they don't have walls as structured like this.
So every fish pond has its own personality and its
own design.
Significant.
Right.
I love how the mountains here seem to embrace the fish pond.
Yes. And so the water that flows from the mountain to the sea the fresh water came into the back of the pond where the Makaha is located that allowed, as the tides go in and out, they attracted the baby fish to come in through the Makaha, the sluice gate, They would come in, they would feed for about 2 or 3 months, grow big enough, they wouldn't be able to get back out. And that is a genius of the Makaha that goes back in ancient times.
Well, and what it says to me is that this is not something new. And it's not something super old, but actually it's been part of who we are in Hawaii for centuries.
It's again using indigenous knowledge and contemporary knowledge and figuring out ways to figure out how we can blend them together and still be respectful.
Super, how exciting.
Thank you.
Today on Island Focus, I have the pleasure of meeting State Senator Jared Kyoho Kalole. Thank you for being with us too. This place is very special to you.
Yeah, it is. I grew up right down the beach at the end of Waikalua Road. I'm really happy to see it in coming back to life.
And I think you were sharing earlier that your family's history also is on these grounds.
The chants around about this place and this area speak about chiefs that my family's descended from. And so I like to think that, you know, we've been here the whole time. And so I think it's an honor to be representing this area and responsible for these places.
So as a newly elected state senator, what are you finding are some of the opportunities for this district to be heard and seen at the state capitol?
For our side of the island, connecting the resources that we have available here to the people. We have lots of young people that need jobs, that are looking for opportunity, and we have lots of resources like this fish pond and many others in the bay that are underutilized resources. And they used to be abundant resources for the community that fed lots of people, and I think that we need to get back to that.
So how is that conversation received?
Well, I think people are willing to listen. It's a process to get folks to, you know, change their thinking of how we should proceed in the future when it comes to food security and just managing our land and our communities in a little bit different way, in a more sustainable way. We import so much of our food, and these used to be these fish ponds in particular used to be major food producers. And so how can we get back to that while still understanding that we live in a different time and we have lots of other challenges?
You introduced a bill recently in the last session that reflected that sentiment.
Yeah, so it was actually my first piece of legislation that passed through the legislature, and it allowed community groups to organize and more easily refurbish fish ponds around the state that have fallen into disrepair to try and pursue efforts like the ones that are going on over here for education, but also for food sustainability, just getting folks back out on the land, you know, working with our natural resources.
As a former legislator myself, I'm very reassured to know that that conversation is happening. And what other sort of initiatives are you working on?
A lot of these efforts are related to stewardship of our land, but we also have to recognize that we're responsible for our people as well. Often the homeless issue on the windward side is underappreciated and underreported. So I'm proud of an effort that we just put together, a public-private partnership to start a medical clinic in Kaneohe that will provide referral to other types of services so that the homeless on this side of the island are not expected to go to town to get a driver's license or to get mental health care or whatever they need.
It seems logical,
Yeah.
especially coming from the perspective of this windward side of the island that really has communities.
We have, you know, lots of newcomers on the windward side, but there are a lot of old families, and the community really is still intact and really tight-knit. And that's what I like about this place. And in a lot of ways, it still is the way it was when I grew up. So I think part of my responsibility is making sure we keep the nice parts of our community, you know, remaining nice, but also figuring out ways to take care of ourselves as a community.
Well, your home base here must have been an inspiration for you to run for office. What's the one thing that you would like to be known for?
I really appreciate that I get to represent the district that my family is from. You know, talking to kupuna in the community, oftentimes I'd hear stories about my own family, about my grandfather who passed away before I was born, people who knew him and appreciated our family. And so I think that's a really great responsibility for me to try and carry on the legacy of our family and our community as folks who care about this place and act accordingly.
Well, we wish you well. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you for having me.
You've just had the pleasure of meeting State Senator Jarrett Kyoho Kalole. Thank you for being with us. Mahalo to the folks at Waikalua Loko Iʻa, the fish pond here in Kaneohe, for hosting us today, and to you for tuning in to Island Focus. I'm Lyla Berg. Aloha and malama pono. Take care of each other. See you soon.